Every single week, you already know you're playing guys like A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry. What I'm looking for in these videos is guys that are normally mid-range flex guys to bottom-end wide receiver 2s or running back 2s. And we've got some good opportunities to go through here today. And I'll be giving away 5 free FN hats for when I hit 18,000 subscribers. And all you have to do to qualify to get one is to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me your hottest take for Week 11 fantasy football. So let's get into our first guy right here. This one is frightening. I will tell you this right now. This one is a very scary one to do. Nick Chubb is a very frightening player to call a must start. In my position, I feel uncomfortable doing this, but I ultimately elected to do it, and here's why. So first off, let's just address reality real quick. Nick Chubb obviously has not been good since he started playing with the Cleveland Browns this year. He's had 2 yards per carry, 3.3 yards per carry, and 2.6 yards per carry in his first 3 games back in NFL action. Obviously, he had one of the most horrific knee injuries that we've seen in a while, and that was actually his second horrific knee injury in his entire career. So it's actually miraculous that he's just coming back playing. Why is he must start though? Well, look at his carries right now. This is the part that I think is really important. 11 carries, 16 carries, and 15 carries. So each single week, he's had a good amount of carries to be able to handle fantasy volume that will actually be significant. He just hasn't had the yards per carry to back it up yet. The efficiency has not been there. What I said after that first week that he came back, listen, 2 yards per carry in your first game back from a major knee injury, that's okay. Nobody's expecting him to come out here and be 5 yards per carry Nick Chubb. Even after the second week, when I said, I want to see just improvement, maybe we could get to 3 yards per carry, he did it to 3.3 yards per carry. And then he backtracked a little bit, went to 2.6 yards per carry. But again, we're looking at the carries here, and the total volume that he's been getting has been good because, number one, he's their best back, even coming off an injury, because they've got Jerome Ford and Deonta Foreman in the backfield. They're not threats to him. And the other part to look at here is what were the opponents like? He was taking on Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Los Angeles Chargers. As bad as Cincy's defense is, they're 13th versus running backs in fantasy. Baltimore is 8th versus running backs in fantasy, and the Chargers are 2nd. They're all very, very stout against fantasy football running backs, so it's okay to me that he did not perform well against those 3 opponents in his first 3 game back into NFL action. This week, he gets a break. New Orleans, 29th versus running backs, and they're getting worse actively. They've been an absolute disaster show over the last several weeks, and they're coming off a bye week as well. Nick Chubb and the Browns are coming off a bye week. I expect that Nick Chubb actually got another week better coming out of this bye week right now. I really like playing Nick Chubb this week. I think it's a good opportunity this week to take with Nick Chubb. Now, our next guy right here, this one also feels uncomfortable because it feels weird having 2 Browns players as must start this week, but I've got Cedric Tillman. I love Cedric Tillman this week. Cedric Tillman, it was pointed out to me. Apparently, I'm higher than consensus when it comes to the fantasy football YouTube community on Cedric Tillman. Honestly, I was kind of shocked, but I was also ahead on Chuba Hubbard, but these are minor details. Listen, I don't understand what's so hard to understand here. With Cedric Tillman, you have to understand this. He wasn't really playing the first several games of the year. When they still had Amari Cooper, they had Jerry Jeudy. He was just a non-factor for the first several weeks here. But since Amari Cooper left and since Jameis Winston took over, 3 games with Jameis Winston, 18.1 fantasy points, 28.9, and 19.5 fantasy points in a full PPR format. Now, Cedric Tillman right here, again, what's most important here and why I believe this is very sustainable and why I was not shy ranking him high in my wide receiver rankings rest of the season and this week is because look at the targets that he's getting weekly. 12 targets, 9 targets, 11 targets, 3 games with Jameis Winston. He has been the clear number 1 wide receiver for Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston also, obviously, nobody disputes this, provides more upside for his wide receivers, whoever he's throwing to for that matter, than Deshaun Watson used to. He is a simply much better and much richer asset to have when you have a wide receiver playing in fantasy football for the Browns. Again, they're coming off a bye week here, and New Orleans is 26th versus the wide receiver position. Matchup opportunity is definitely there. And listen, I did not like this guy out of college. I'm not going to lie to you and say that I did. I did not see this coming. But what we're seeing here with Jameis Winston is that he clearly prefers Cedric Tillman as his wide receiver 1, and he has clearly blown my expectations out of the water through 3 games. The last 3 games, he's blown my expectations out of the water. because I never expected this. But he has been really good, and that's why he's also a must-start this week. Dropping out to our next guy right here. You know, with George Pickens, I really like him this week. And I will say this, I've also had my reservations on George Pickens as well. I was not huge on George Pickens heading into 2024 as a collective unit. Like, I didn't think this was going to be a good year for him. And honestly, I thought the Russell situation would be a disaster. I thought that them switching from Fields over to Russell Wilson was ultimately going to become a disaster for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and specifically for George Pickens. It's actually been the exact opposite, and clearly I was wrong about that one. This one has been absolutely awesome for George Pickens here. 3 games with Russell Wilson, 22.1 fantasy points, 11.4, and 20.5 in a full PPR format. Now again, it's important to dive into the deeper numbers here. And of course, the number that matters the most is what is he getting target-wise. Now, his targets are not the same as what we just went through with Cedric Tillman. 9 targets, 5 targets, 7 targets. That makes me a little bit more nervous on this one. But what you have to understand by looking at that and seeing the production that he's been able to put up with Russell Wilson, it's just been more efficient than he ever was with Justin Fields. He's just able to capitalize on more targets than he was with Justin Fields. He's doing better with Russell Wilson as far as efficiency on a per target basis goes. Now, I said this earlier in the week right here. It's very important to know this. I've been watching the Steelers-Ravens matchup my entire life. As long as I can remember being alive, I'm a Steelers fan. But fantasy analysis comes first. This matchup, Steelers-Ravens, is usually who's got the bigger balls, aka who's going to run the ball better and who's going to be more physical in this game. There's usually more running and less throwing in this particular matchup here. But there's a couple reasons why I love George Pickens this week. First of all, Baltimore's dead last versus wide receivers. They cannot stop a nosebleed. Like, they literally are incapable of stopping any wide receiver. And this was before the Jamar Chase blow-up that just happened. They've been bad against wide receivers all year long. And Pickens is also the clear number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh. He's got no competition. So as far as I'm concerned, even if it's a 6 or 7 target game, I think the potential that he hits on a couple big plays is through the roof, because I just do not think the Ravens have the ability to be able to cover George Pickens for an entire 4-quarter game, and that's why I think George Pickens is a good play this week. Dropping out to our quarterback start of the week right here, you know, Bo Nix, I'm not sure people understand how good this guy has been this year. Bo Nix has been absolutely fantastic, specifically over the last month and a half of fantasy football. Now, the first several weeks, as you can see on the screen, were really rough for Bo Nix. He threw 4 interceptions through the first 2 or 3 games or something like that. It's been really bad for Bo Nix in those first several weeks. He's a rookie. It's totally understandable. He was viewed as a not particularly great prospect coming out of the draft anyways. But since week 5, something changed. Something definitely flipped for Bo Nix here, because he turned it up in fantasy football production. 25 points, 22 points, 14, 32, 17, and 17 fantasy points since week 5. There's not a bust game in there from a rookie quarterback with the Denver Broncos and their weapons that they have. He has not had a bust week. Now, since week 2 also, he's thrown 2 interceptions. That's not a lot. That's very little amount of interceptions since week 2 of the NFL season. And I want to also highlight this as well. 2 games in that stretch since week 5 where he's thrown no passing touchdowns. How is he able to sustain fantasy upside in those particular games? Well, look at what he's doing on a rushing basis right here. This is where it gets interesting and why I think that Bo Nix is such a good play every single week at this point. 61, 75, and 36 rushing yards in 3 separate games, and also 2 rushing touchdowns in there as well. Bo Nix has legs, man. This guy is running the ball as well. He's a dual threat. He's not your particularly traditional dual threat where he's actually like a threat to take off and rip off a 60-yard touchdown run like a Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson or Jay Daniels can. But what this guy is always going to be mobile when a play breaks down. He's able to pick up positive yardage with his own legs or extend the play and launch it down the field as well. Atlanta's 27th versus quarterbacks here. Their defense is a disgrace. They just got ripped apart by Derek Carr. So I think Bo Nix at home in Denver, coming off 2 bad losses is going to be really, really hungry for a win here, and I expect Bo Nix to sling it all over the field on the Atlanta Falcons. He's a great start at quarterback this week. And our tight end start of the week right here. I'm going out on a limb here. I'll be honest, the tight end position has been wild this year. Cole Kmet. I've got Cole Kmet this week versus the Green Bay Packers as my tight end start of the week. Now listen, like I said, tight end position has been crazy this year. Let's just all address reality on this one. Ever since Travis Kelce is not the dominant number one tight end anymore, the tight end market has been totally reset. It's been completely reset. And nobody knows what to do quite well at the tight end position right now. And like a lot of tight ends this year, Cole Kmet has had a couple boom games, but mostly bust games. You can see that on the screen right now. He's had two 20-point games in a full PPR format and a lot of bust games where he's getting you like 4 points, 3 points, 5 points in fantasy football. Now, Chicago also just fired their offensive coordinator. Shane Waldron, he's out of the building at this point. So, with this situation in Chicago, their offense has been abysmal since they came out of the bye week. What makes them a good play this week? Let me tell you this. This is honestly going to be a gut call I'm making right now, because what I've seen over the years is sometimes when players are getting rid of a bad coach, sometimes that following week, they have a sudden burst of energy that they didn't show for the last several weeks. It reminds me when Josh McDaniels got fired in Las Vegas last year. They came out the next week with Antonio Pierce as interim head coach, won the game. Dennis Allen just last week in New Orleans. They beat the Falcons, snapping a 7-game losing streak, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling came out of nowhere with two receiving touchdowns, and Derek Carr played well as well. So with this matchup here, I think Cole Kmet might just benefit the most. Green Bay is 22nd versus tight end position here, so they're susceptible to tight end production. I'm just going to call it. I think that the matchup lines up. I think that there's several factors that aren't measured by statistics. What we just went through is not measured by statistics here. So I do believe that Cole Kmet is going to have a touchdown game. This is a gut call for me, but it is my tight end play of the week. So let me know how your lineup is starting to look this weekend. If you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for this week, click on this video right here.